My name is Lizzie Nolan. I'm the Vice President of Helix Health and Wellness. We are a telehealth company located here in Chicago, Illinois. I'm here with Meet Advisors, and we're doing a series on health and technology. My interviewee today is Marc Hilary, MD. He is also the co-founder of doc&i, which is another local startup. Thank you, Marc, so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time, and we're really excited to talk to you a little bit about the work that doc&i is doing, and you and your partner here in Chicago being involved in the digital healthcare space. So why don't we start off telling us a little bit about yourself and what doc&i does?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me and having doc&i. We truly enjoy the opportunity to share the great things we hope we're doing for doctors, for patients, for the population. So I wanted to just start there. In terms of doc&i, in a nutshell, doc&i is a software that allows providers at the point of care to make informed decisions around the prescriptions they write for patients before patients get to the pharmacy. Something that seems simple, but is not occurring in everyday life. So we are basically a transparency platform that allows wise decisions and informed decisions to be made within doctors' workflow when that critical time is the decision is at a critical point.
Wow, so really bringing transparency, a bit of accountability maybe to prescriptions?
Absolutely,
wow.
Absolutely. So
what a novel idea, right?
Absolutely, and to answer your question about, or to share more about background, I am an MD. I graduated from medical school, decided not to practice medicine, but wanted to foray into business, and landed in pharma sales and moved up the ladder as an executive professional in pharmaceuticals, and saw a huge problem as it pertains to physicians and providers writing prescriptions for patients without that knowledge surrounding what a patient is going to pay out of pocket, if a patient is going to the right pharmacy, if there's a better alternative, giving any types of issues for the patients that they can select, and having that all right there in front of them. We saw this problem every day, seeing hundreds of doctors and not knowing what to do, but just kind of doing what they're used to doing. So we realized that this is something that really needs to be done for the population as a whole, patients, doctors, and everyone.
Yeah, it sounds like a much needed service. What do you think is one of the biggest barriers to a service like that existing? You know, why is doc&i the first one to do it?
Well, we get that question often, and thank you. To be fair, we believe it's our task to bear, but we also know that there's capitalism, obviously, and proprietary systems that have the ability to kind of block true information going out to the consumer, which is the patient in this case. So there's a lot of ways to get the information that doc&i will provide, but who wants to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, go through phone calls, letters, back and forth, trying to get a simple piece of information that should be available at the point of care? So it hasn't been done up till now because of proprietary walls, capitalism, and also because a lot of the larger retailers don't want this information to necessarily get out.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is that, you know, doctors, there's a lot of disconnect for the different people that are involved in the prescription services. But it also seems from what you're saying that consumers are kind of unaware of all of these things happening. If you had to pinpoint something, you were like, consumers really need to know this about pharmaceuticals and prescription management, what would that thing be?
Well, they have power and they have the right to know this information. They just have to be willing to ask or demand. This is a world of consumerism where things are shifting now from the merchant to more the consumer or the customer. And patients, at the end of the day, when they're purchasing prescriptions, are customers. So they deserve to have the ability to know what they're expected to pay before they have to pay. Only in pharmaceuticals, and for everyone out here listening to think about, any other form of, I guess you could say, item that you're looking to purchase, whether it's an automobile, a hotel, a plane ticket, you can kind of price shop or find out what you're going to pay before you have to pay. Well, in pharmaceuticals, the way the system is set up, unbeknownst to most people, only when you get to the counter do you now find out what you're expected to pay, whether you're going to pay cash or copay.
So even the people on the end don't know.
Absolutely.
Wow.
The pharmacist as well is in the dark. The pharmacist relies on a digital, I guess you could say, clearinghouse to then ping or send out a request to the insurance of the patient and then get a price back right there at the counter. So the pharmacist doesn't know as well until they, quote, run your script. So this is a problem that needs to be solved, and doc&i is here to solve that.
It sounds like a huge issue, and I guess one of my other questions is, it sounds like there's a lot of reason for the consumer to want a product like doc&i, right? But what is the impetus for the physician? Is it just patient satisfaction, which is important, but
Yes.
it's not usually something that'll make people
Yes.
take on a new technology or, a new vendor.
Yes.
So what's in it
absolutely.
for the docs? What's in it for everyone else?
Yes, great question. And that's our secret sauce. We like to say we're looking to start with the provider. There are a lot of applications in the world that can allow the patient or the consumer to go ahead and price shop or find out ways to save money. But the reason the providers, we believe, really need this information is because providers, A, need to know this information. B, it's taking a lot of their time. There's a lot of administrative cost burden associated with patients and doctors having to go back and forth around prescriptions. For example, in the normal case, a doctor writes you a prescription. The doctor doesn't know if it's covered or not. The doctor doesn't know if there's going to require a prior authorization. The doctor doesn't know if the patient's going to just get to the counter and say, hey, I can't take this. Is there an alternative?
Right.
Doc and I will provide that. But in the normal case, it's only when they get to that pharmacy counter and then there's these callbacks.
Right.
There's fax backs, there's insurers, there's pharmacists, there's patients themselves now getting back in touch with the doctor, which breaks their workflow, which breaks them away from what they like to do or need to do, which is take care of patients in a time-sensitive environment. So the doctors will save time, headache, will make informed decisions, and many times they will be incented in terms of writing the right prescriptions up front, which helps the system that employs them to be more efficient in terms of their workflow and streamlining everything.
Right. So it sounds like a lot of what you're offering for physicians as well is scalability of their
Yes.
prescription management services.
Yes.
Because like you're saying, you can't make all these phone calls all day, especially if you have, 80 people you're seeing a day,
Yes.
something outrageous.
Yes.
So it's really allowing them to scale that service.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
That's great. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I mentioned that Marc is also a member of the digital health community here called Matter, which Helix Health and Wellness is also a member.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what, you talked about you went to medical school and then kind of shifted into business.
Yes.
What inspired you to become, after that shift, then to become an entrepreneur and take
Yes.
on this other journey of life?
Absolutely. No, thank you. Great question. While I was in pharmaceuticals, I always had a burning desire to do something grand and do something for the entirety of healthcare and medicine. And being in corporate oftentimes doesn't foster that need or that desire, but being in corporate opened my eyes to seeing the problem as it exists, where everyone kind of goes about their business, but there's a true need, a true problem that needs a solution.
Right.
So that was the impetus, seeing from the pharmaceutical sales rep standpoint, the problems that the physician has every day, the nursing staff has every day, the administrative staff in the office has every day over something as simple as making the right decision when you're making the decision with the patient around prescriptions. There's 6 billion prescriptions annually, and that number is going to increase. And so when you're talking about that divided amongst the 800,000 physicians, they have a load of prescriptions they're writing. Most people, when they go to the doctor, they are written a prescription. So at the end of the day, we realize this is a huge problem. This is something that we did our research and looked into and realized it's not going to be solved anytime soon. It's up to us, to try and go ahead and do our best to help solve that problem. So it was a burning desire from a business standpoint, entrepreneurship as a whole, and just seeing a huge problem that needed a solution. And my co-founder and I, we went ahead and said we're going to give that solution to the world.
Well, I, for one, am glad that you decided to. How about the startup community here in Chicago? How has that been a help or a hindrance to you and your partner and Doc and I generally on this journey?
Great. The help from the startup community here has been great. As I'm learning, and as we all will learn in the entrepreneur world, there's a lot of relationships that are important as much as anything else. I mean, it's a relational business in addition to just simple business or transactional business. So the relationships in the startup community have been wonderful. Matter, for example, has been hugely important in helping us meet the right people to keep moving up that mountain to success. So I believe that the startup community has a kind of non-competition but more collaborative thought process. So as opposed to the large corporate industries that don't share information, in the startup community there's more of a sharing, and we're going to help each other do big things type of ethos and attitude. So in a nutshell, it's been very helpful to speak with many entrepreneurs. Some more seasoned, some who have exited and been successful, some just in the beginning stages. So either way, everyone does their best to help when they can. And so it's been very helpful for us.
Absolutely. I found the same thing. It's just a real sense of, community. And I think it's really for people who, work from home or just have one partner, it's nice to see other people and, collaborate with other people that are struggling with a lot of the same things. Even though we might not all be in healthcare, the startup journey does have, specific points. So I've also really benefited from that community. I think the Chicago one is really great. So I just want to ask you one last question about, kind of inspiration. So what digital in health innovation that's come out in the last few years do you find most inspiring?
Well, that's a great question. I find a lot of successful digital health innovations and innovations in the digital space in general inspiring. I can't really name one in particular, but what I will say is that kudos to all of them, obviously. Beyond that, though, one thing that did inspire me from the digital standpoint, not so much as an inspiration in terms of their success, the EHRs, the electronic health records, these large behemoths of companies that have now I guess you could say become entrenched in healthcare, where doctors are now no longer using charts, but using the digital records. And we realize this is one of the main things that, because of federal mandate, they've scaled, they've been very successful. They're in every single hospital that's a large hospital system. Doctors are using them, but the doctor's frustration is at an all-time high because they don't really give the information that doctors need at the time they need it, especially around prescriptions. So that's what influenced my co-founder and I to say, hey, we have to do something about this. And that's why our job is to make sure our point of care real-time solution does engage or interface or integrate into those electronic health records at the right time, such that doctors can have the information we're giving integrated into their workflow and make things seamless. So the EHRs really influenced me because as a sales rep, doctors would pull their hair out often out of frustration, but they were forced to use them. So that did inspire me to say, hey, we can do something about this and help you and your patients around prescriptions make the best decisions.
And use the tools that you're being asked to use more effectively. That's wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I loved hearing more about doc&i and about your journey. Thank you to all of our watchers for our health and technology series here on Meet Advisors. Once again, I'm here with Dr. Marc Hilary, the co-founder of doc&i, and I'm Lizzie Nolan. My partner Les Hedman and I have this show surrounded on our startup, Helix Health and Wellness, which is a telehealth company here in Chicago. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.